Thanks,
Good.
Mustafa. If I might make a quick request, my friend, when we had the camera on earlier, which was great, so you can see who's asking questions and things, I it had a blur, so I could only see you. If you do turn the camera back on, could I ask you to turn off the blur so I can see everyone and know who I'm talking to, if you don't mind? Thank you, mate. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Um,
no worry.
appreciate it. Appreciate it.
There's still a blur, Mustafa. I don't know whether it's possible to
Ending now.
so that we
Working
can
on it, I
see
think.
the team behind you.
Yeah. Okay. So,
Much appreciated, Mustafa. And we'll have time to cover everything, even though we've started a little late. That'll be fine. So not worried about that.
Anyway, let's keep to the time. Maybe just let me introduce the team that's here this morning. Very good morning to APU again. Great to see you guys. Of course, we have Robert Yon. He's now based in Sydney, and he's calling in from Sydney.
He's in Melbourne.
Oh, Melbourne. Yes, I
Melbourne.
always thinking, yeah. True that. Sorry. 12 hours away. Okay. And then we have Jordan, and he's going to be conducting the demo today. Yes, we've all really appreciated all his expertise in the previous demonstration. And today we will be focusing on actually a few things that will be of interest to APU. One will be auto scheduling. But before we touch on auto scheduling, we need to do a bit of background kind of homework also as well, where we talk about preferences and how we collect data also as well. I'm Trevor, and we have Sanusa as well. She's based in Malaysia. Robert, Yon, anything else you want to add before I think the idea is basically, before I pass the time to Jordan, let's go through basically the modules and then just ask them a few more questions of how they do their auto scheduling. I think that's the intention before I pass to Jordan. Robert, Yon, anything else you want to add?
You're on mute, RJ.
Yes,
That happens to the best of us, mate.
Good to see the APU again. It'll almost it's not the same room, I believe. But it's a pleasure to see some familiar faces, and I look forward to move on with you.
Awesome.
Right.
And just maybe to add to that as well, Mustafa, what we'll probably do, and team, what we'll probably do after Trevor gives us a quick intro there is we might break down, you may have heard us talking about it, break down some of the things that you're currently doing, some of your expectations around exam specific functionality, and understand what you really need. So I can focus on that in our demonstration and talk about some of the additional things that we can do that you maybe currently don't do, and talk about where we can add value for you as well. So that'll be the start of our conversation today, and then we'll jump into the product.
Okay, Jordan, I can give you a briefing about what we're having here as a process, exactly more on exam scheduling.
Wonderful.
So, okay. So exam scheduling is more on tracking. Actually, we use it to track the exam. So we have two systems managing the exam schedulings. So the data entry actually starting from the exam what they call course schedule. We call it course schedule. So this is how they know when the exam. So the exam team, the exam unit team, they will take this exam duration for each module and they start keying this data inside the system. So from the system, they have to key in the module code, the intakes that involve in this exam, and when the exam will start, when the exam will end. So it will, in the course schedule, it will be week. It will not have exact date. So this is at the beginning. So the student, they will know from our mobile application, this is your exam week. Okay, so they know when they have 5 modules per semester, so they know the duration week. It will be, most of the time will be either 1 week or 2 weeks, the exam duration. So based on the course schedule, which is prepared by our scheduler team. So this is each intake, they have to prepare 4 weeks earlier, or 4 or 8 to 4 weeks earlier than the intake start when the course schedule. So once it's ready, they pass it to exam unit team. The exam unit start key in the data, then they know the exam duration for each intake. So this is the first data entry happening manually actually from the exam. Yeah, but we are, yeah. So this one we need to later optimize it and we make it automated. So once they key in the course schedule, automatically key in the data inside the exam unit team. So maybe this is something that we enhance from the system. Okay, so this is when the data entered. So the tracking for the exam will start. Actually, we have formula to let the lecturer to submit the exam paper. So the lecturer need to submit. They have like 1 month after the intake start. They have to send the exam paper. So they have to submit. Then the exam paper will be reviewed by internal people and external. Also, we have external board. They have to review also the exam paper and they approve. So this is also need tracking and reminder for lecturer, and we have also reminder for lecturer to come out to let them to submit the exam before the due date. And if they approach the due date, they have we send exception for the head of school that this lecturer didn't submit, so to avoid the delay of the review actually from internal and external party. So after that happening, then after 2 months of the intake start. So normally our semester 4 months. So after 2 months, the exam unit they start arranges for the exact date of the exam, because just now I mentioned for you course schedule only mentioned the week, but after 1 month plus or 2 months, they start arrange for the exact date for the exam. So why they need that? To allocate the time and the duration for this. I mean, they have specific place they have to arrange. So the seats also. So they have to know which module gonna arrange for each day. So normally they start by the highest intake, like module 1. We have, for example, they said in week 1 in July, we have 5 modules. So this for this intake, and they have other intake like they have to list all intake which has exam on that time, 1st of July, first week of July. Then they list the intake, then they list module under each intake which has exam, then they see which one the shared one, then they do the exam together for the same intake, same module. So in the end, uh, some of them they sharing the same class or no, but they care about the exam happening for both of the intake which sharing the same module. So this is the second system where they decide. They do Excel sheet. This one, what I'm explaining right now, is an Excel sheet happening, which is
Okay.
we're looking for the system to handle this actually. So the
Okay.
scheduling of the date and the time. We have the data, but they still need to do it manually right now in Excel sheet. So after they come out with this scheduling in the exam sheet, then they have to key in another system. Why they have to key in the other system? Because the student want to know the exact date. So when they key in the other system, we call it exam admin, exam schedule admin. So once they key in there and they activate it, then it's appeared for the student in their timetable, exam timetable. So they know this time, exact time and exact date for each module. Okay,
Okay.
so I mean, this is in general the process. So for the exam, how it's happening.
Yeah. Okay. If you don't mind, I have a couple of questions. So you mentioned two systems being used. I understand that there is a system, well, pardon me, Excel is being used for managing things like which, intakes have examinations that occur at the same time,
For the
highest
scheduling. For
for the
the schedule.
scheduling. Yep. Yep. And then the data entry, that information needs to be keyed in at the start of the process you mentioned. Where is that being keyed into?
So there's one system we call it exam paper scheduling system. So actually this is one of the why they need to key in at the first system, actually more on tracking form exam paper submission, for exam paper marking, for exam paper second marking, first marking. We
Yep.
have this process, internal
Got
process,
it.
and we have also mark release date also. So that one,
Right.
the field system, all of this tracking
Yep.
procedure, and it has its own notification, it has its own reminders and exceptions for breaching the date. So to make everything in control. So this is mainly on marking procedure or assessment procedure,
Got it.
while the
Got it.
other system is more on the date data entry, which is they need to know the exact date, the scheduling. So that's why we keen in another system.
Great. Great. And so today we're going to talk about the scheduling. The paper
Yes.
management side of things is, while I understand it's a parallel process for you, that's not something that our system handles. It doesn't handle paper management currently. So the tracking of the papers, the marking, these things, we can talk about scheduling marking and things like that for instructors and invigilators. We can talk about that as a concept, but paper management is something that's not in our current system. It's about scheduling and it's about some other pieces that I'll ask you about. So you mentioned seating. I also wanted to ask you about how you handle special needs. So any students with special needs, and what you do with that, and how you handle communication with invigilators, people who are supervising the examinations. What's the process there? Is that part of your scheduling process?
Okay, what I explained for you is before the exam date. So just about like pre-exam. So during the exam, the process, like you mentioned, arrange seat arrangement, they also do manually right now, and this
Okay.
is one of pain point that we are trying to solve it for them. And Arsalan, he's working on this to find solution. And there is, we saw in Unitime, they have this solution. So once we key in the data inside Unitime, then it can do the arrangement for the testing. We have our exam hall is quite huge, like it has around 300 plus per hall. Now it's bigger hall. Last time we have 4 halls. Now we move to big campus. I mean, recently we move out the exam hall to the big campus. So now it's allocating 500 plus student in one hall.
Right.
But this is temporary until the bigger hall also going out building. We're building bigger hall also to accommodate more student at the same time. So the target is our receipt arrangement is happening. We have module 1, module A, and module B. So module A, starting by first row, then take odd number. First row, third row, fifth row, the same module. While the even number, the second row and third row, it will be for module B. So to avoid like cheating or other cheating skills from the student, we keep some gaps between them, and the sitting will be in opposite. So like I'm facing the student, so we are, because we're using online exam, we are not using paper exam. So they all bring their own laptops and they have to conduct the exam. We have lockdown browser. So they have to open the browser, and so we avoid the student to see other screen. So maybe later I show you one photo. I send you one photo of how the exam hall look like.
Yeah.
So in this way of arrangement for the setting, so first row module A, the third row module A, until finish the number. Like we have 200 students. Yeah, this is Miss Salbia, the head of exam unit. She's joining now, and thing. So what they do, they make sure enough gap between the same modules. So one row enough for, then they keep space between each module. Then we have another special arrangement, like you mentioned, the special cases, receipt and retake student. So always there are some modules that some student they fail the module, so they do receipt. So after 1 month of the release of the results, we give them directly. The exam unit also need to arrange seat for them. They have to also publish for them. So normally they join the fresh intake.
Right.
Like if student now he's joining, he failed, then there is another intake in 1 month. They join the other intake, the same module. But if there is no fresh intake, join doing the same module after 1 month, so they have to allocate seat for them separately other than the fresh intake, which don't have this same module at that time. So this is how. Then there is student also who fail 3 times. They have to retake, or for any reason they have to retake the whole module also. So they are from old intakes, maybe 1 year, 2 years. They are in year 3 already, but this module from year 1 also. So I mean, they have to, they can pass year 1 and year 2 if they have one module fail, for example, or two, not more than two, for example, according to the university policy. So anyway, they have to arrange for them seat during the exam, or any, as long as they are eligible to attend the exam, they have to arrange for them. This is what we call special cases. So we call it receipt and retake student. So also the
Okay.
seat should be arranged properly for them to not like conflict with the fresh intakes.
Right. Right.
And this is done manually as well, right, Mustafa? This arrangement for the receipt and retake students, is it done manually?
Yes, it's done manually, and one this is why Arsalan now trying to find solution in Unitime to key in the data for the exam, then do the seat allocation automatically. So no need to spend hours, because now it's become very huge work for the exam unit, which they have limited headcount like to do the work, because they have to key in the data in the first system. They have to key in the data in the second system. They have to go and visualize also physically from they starting from 10:30 until 4:30. They have to do physical and visualizing. Then they have to again key in the setting, the arrange the settings. So that's very, I mean, Miss Salvia can explain more. uh, how many exam you have per week, how many intakes also they have to attend. You can, yeah. So Miss
Okay.
Salvia, this is about this system. I mean, we are now in meeting that uh, TimeEdit, or this system has this module called exam scheduling. So the team now, they willing to share with us how the system work, but they want to know how we are operating right now, how the process happening for exam scheduling. So they see how the system can help us to make things better in term of process of data entry, or the scheduling of the exam, or the seat management, and everything can be better for. So you can describe a bit what we're having right now, so to allow the team to understand how we are operating, then they can advise more how we can make things better.
Okay, from the ESS, we have to extract the intakes to the Excel, and then we have to
ESS,
check
yeah,
manually.
Ms. Salvia, just explain for them what's mean ESS. ESS, the first system I explained for you, exam scheduling paper. So where they key in from the course schedule, the intake and the module and the exam week. So from there they extract in Excel sheet and they do the exam scheduling. So the data from the system actually they extracting. Yeah, Ms. Salvia, go ahead, sorry.
Okay, where should I continue? Until when?
Yes. Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, from the exam system, we have to copy and put in the Excel, and then we have to check by modules, by intake, and by class code how many students. So if the module and the intake is merging, then we have to merge manually. It's not automatic. So after that, we have to check the capacity of the exam hall, how many can put in, and then we have to arrange the modules and intake is not in the same day. It should be different day. So that is also scheduled manually. And we have, let's say we want to put different modules and different intakes in one day, but we have to make sure the capacity of the exam hall is enough to put in.
Can I clarify something? Your exam hall, are you only putting all of your exams in one hall? There is no
Yes.
other rooms, it's simply one hall?
Yes, for the time
Yep.
being, the capacity is 487. So if let's say we have to schedule more than, let's say there's one module with big number of students around 600 plus, then we have to book another room to uh, to conduct the exam.
Okay,
Mm.
no worries. Okay, sure. I
Okay,
think
Jordan,
that's
I
been
think
really,
we're
really
good, right?
helpful. Yeah,
Yeah.
super helpful. That's really, really good. I think I'll be able to talk to. There's some things in here that that the system doesn't do natively, but there are some solutions for what you're describing that I can think of, especially since you really have one big hall and then you have some extra rooms that you might use in an emergency case. But long story short, I think we can break that one big hall into a series of zones that are the sequences you've talked about. And we can talk about ways that we might handle this. What I'd like to do today is, what I had in mind was to start with the auto scheduling capability, because that's what is sort of fundamental to all of this. The auto scheduling capability makes all this possible. And you can see how you can schedule the exams themselves. And then we can talk about the actual seating and these sorts of things as well. Does that sound good to everybody?
Yeah,
Yep.
let's do that. Yep.
Cool.
That means we
worries.
don't need to do manually on the seating arrangement. I mean, all from the system, is it?
Yeah, so you know what? Actually, it's probably a better idea then.
Yeah.
Let's say we've got an examination scheduled, and that might be the first place we start. We'll actually look at the seating arrangements and some of these things first, and then we'll go back to the auto scheduling as to how we actually schedule this examination automatically to a date and a time. We're going to start from the end of the process and talk about things like seating, because I think that's the bit that's the most interesting here right now. The auto scheduling, I think, I'm confident we can handle that. And that's something we can talk about later, I think. So let's actually turn it on its head. We'll start with something like seating and the examination. Alrighty?
Yeah.
Cool,
Okay.
cool, cool. All right, great. So,
Jordan, before you start,
yes.
can I add two things to
Yeah,
the list?
please.
You have a solution for it? Because part of our exam process is two things. We have facial recognition. So the student who need to go to the exam hall, they have to go through facial recognition. So to avoid any external party who's going on the exam and make sure this is a student in APU. Number two is we are enhancing the system to make sure this student, yes, he has exam, but we want to make sure he's the one who enter during his exam slot. Now we just validate is his APU student or no by the facial recognition. But our, uh, target from exam scheduling, we already know the time slot for this student when he has to go in. So we are trying to improve the system. Only he can go in on Monday from 10 to 12. This is his exam
Right.
slot only. So if he come at 1 o'clock, he's not supposed to enter. So sometimes because some student helping other student, they go attend
Yeah.
exam on behalf
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
them. So
Yeah.
we are trying to. So this number one. Number two is now we have Moodle. Moodle. I'm not sure if your system has
Yep.
any integration with Moodle. So if we are using lockdown browser, I'm not sure if you're aware of lockdown browser, but this is just
Yep.
block the exam environment to attend the exam. So if you have anything related with this concept to save exam, like to make sure the student not opening other tabs and make sure is the student attend the exam that they have to attend, and once they finish they have to submit, then no more changes. So if you have anything like integrated with the exam schedule will be great also.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, Jordan, if you can see my slide now, maybe are you,
Sorry, I'm on a
Mustafa,
different.
are you able to see my slide that
Yep, I can
I'm
see that
showing?
there. Yep.
Yes, we
Yeah,
do.
so just a quick segue before I pass the time to Jordan. TimeEdit has an open API. So whatever you're mentioning about facial recognition and Moodle, these are things that we can integrate into the system and pull the data from there. So again, trying to reduce all this manual entry and all this manual work, and that's
Yeah.
done through integration. And it can be, if you can see on the right, whether it's digital signages, whether it's facial recognition, as long as your upstream or downstream systems can handle the open API, we can actually integrate into that. whether it's your student management system, your exam management system that you're talking about also as well, where you have all the course codes, we can actually look into integrating that as well into TimeEdit. Yeah. So I thought this is good reference when Jordan's actually talking. Not all the data that you see him in the system is manually entered. Some of this data can actually be integrated from your systems, like the course codes and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's a really good start for my answer to those last 2 points, Mustafa. So for the facial recognition, you can use our API to pull from the timetable which students are in which examination sessions, right? So that would be the way that you can verify. You use your external system, you map that up, probably through your ESB or something similar, to ensure that the students who you are checking facial recognition, it can also then query our database to see, right, well, the examination that's happening right now is Engineering 101, and Mustafa should not be in Engineering 101. We have a problem. And that's how that can support that. How we can also support, you mentioned about the lockdown browser, very similar situation. Moodle, as my understanding, is quite comprehensive with its API. It's quite well enabled. Again, we have an API that you can leverage. So again, in theory, you could pull timetable information like you did for facial recognition to check that Trevor, who's taking the current examination, is taking an examination for Anthropology 102. And that should be what he is accessing in the lockdown browser. Now, the next step for that is that you can pull who should be doing what and when from the timetable, but we can't assist you with the configuration of your lockdown browser, obviously, to use that information. That's up to you, but you can pull the information you need to verify who the person is that's doing what at which time. So we can definitely, and those sorts of use cases we can support, and you can get quite creative with your integration possibilities there as well.
Okay, as long
Exactly.
as we have this data, we can sync with our facial recognition device, which has its already API, and we can create session for each like duration expired date, like this student can enter from this time to this time. So this device is high capability. You just need the data right now.
Okay, sure. Well, the data that you would handle in TimeEdit, whether it's for classes or examinations, is able to, and again, you need the data in the system. So you need to have student data that we can get access to. And we need to be able to put those students in some sort of structure for you to be able to pull that, right? And to use that data the way we're talking about. But provided the data is there, yes, you could do what I'm talking about.
Very good.
Awesome. All right, let's.
One last slide, and Jordan, I'll pass the time to you.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
just
sounds
want
good.
to understand what exam does. So basically, this slide will just give you an idea. So TimeEdit has an exam management module that sits on its core scheduling engine. So when you actually see what Jordan is showing you, he's sometimes he will have multiple tabs open, but it's still one system. And what we're going to show you today is basically how our exam management module handles rooms planning, exam scheduling, supervisors in terms of invigilators, as well as students and managing them, as well as seating allocations also as well. All right. So that's what our management module does. But I'm going to pass the time to Jordan now, and he's going to actually show you how the system actually is set up for doing this. All right. Thanks, Jordan. Over to you. You're on mute, Jordan.
I deserve that after I made fun of Robert Chan earlier. Firstly, thank you, Mustafa and Sabia, for such vivid information. That's really, really helpful, and I hope that makes today's demonstration even better for you. I'm going to share my screen, and where I'm going to start is with an examination that I have already scheduled, and it has been brought into my exam module, where we're going to look at things like seating capacity, student seating allocation, special needs invigilators, and then we will go backwards into auto scheduling and data collection. All right. So we're going to start at the end. Mostly because I think that is your primary concern here, really, is the examination capacity and that sort of thing. A lot of the other stuff we're happy to meet, no worries at all. So what we see in front of us here is an example of our exam module. And so to recap, as I said, we schedule this in core, as Trevor mentioned. Every time something is automatically scheduled, and again, I will explain this a little later, but I've auto-scheduled some examinations. They're in my calendar, and I can send those across using my exam plugin here, where I can pull all of the relevant information, like which rooms should it be in or which areas should it be in. So in your case, you have one big hall. So perhaps you might use zones or some other solution for this to be able to separate areas. Or you could simply have it randomly allocated. That's another way. Pulls information about which students, modules, anything else. So things like enrollment patterns. If you have the data, you can pull it across and use it. All right. And that then does is says, right, you have a session that you're scheduling for this module or group of modules. This is the examination you've scheduled. Now you need to do some of the seating and these things with it. So let's get that into exam. And that's how we end up here with this screen. And that's where we're going to start with things like students and seating. So looking in front of us here, we have some information. We have some information about when it should be scheduled. So I have a date that has been collected. You may not have an exact date. As you mentioned in your process, there's a period from which you have a week and then it becomes a date. There's a lot of ways we can handle that. But in my world here, I have an exact date. I also have obviously one big room where it's going to be scheduled. We'll talk about room and spaces in a little bit. And as you see here, I have the information that we pulled from my system, right? So who's teaching it, potentially who should be invigilating it, student groups. So this will tell me which students should be involved. And in this group are my 12 students, yeah? So it pulls those students across and all of the information that I need to know about my students. So let's start with looking at those students. Here I have the 12 students in question, all right? So that's been populated for me. I see obviously things like names, unique identifiers, which you can give them, certain codes, lots of different things you can do. And as you can see, I can sort these. So I can, if I wanted to give them seating values, I can do that by sorting some form of value here and then allocating them seats based on whatever order I have picked. Now, some of these students have some additional needs, like they need extra time, or they need to be in their own room, or they need to be away from other students, whatever that might be, that can also be brought in. So if that's something you have in a student management system or a disability management system, you can bring that in here and represent that with your students. You can also add students manually if you need to for any reason. But again, you usually do this via your student groups that you schedule for each examination in our core system, which is where you actually schedule the examination. Likewise, if I've got students here and for some reason I need to modify or handle the special needs that are for each of these students, I can do that. Now in my system, I have a list here of some special needs that I can use. So things like they need a rest area, or they need a certain computer, they need their own room, and so on. You can customize these values. This is not the limit of the values you have available to you, so you can have different sorts of needs that you might represent here. And you can obviously modify them in this screen. And from here, we start with things like seating. Now, I haven't really set this up in a room yet, so I can't allocate them seats. So we'll come back to this once we set it in a room and we talk about things like room capacities and invigilators. All right. So let's hit the schedule exam. Now, in the real world, this will already be scheduled at a date and time, generally speaking. So what we're doing here usually won't be necessary. I'm showing you the most manual process, so you understand what it's like if you have to manually intervene with anything or move things around. Similarly, in my world here, and I'll just zoom in a little bit so it's nice and clear for you. I have 6 rooms that I'm going to use for this particular day in my exam week. The thing with these rooms is that these are 6 separate rooms, but because you only have one big hall, you may have some separate rooms, but you may also have your big hall divided into zones potentially. Up to you. This is something we'd scope with you if you chose to use the system as to the best way to move forward. But in either case, if I have an exam that is in a room. And I've got my grand auditorium here. Let me put this exam in there. You can see live that this group of students is 10. I have a group of students, a separate group of students with special needs because they need extra time, right? There's 2 students there. I have put that 10 students in this exam hall, and I now see that I have 90 seats out of 100 remaining. If I put this group in, I should see 88. And so the capacity question there, as examinations are placed in any space, whether it's the one big room, whether it's zones of your big room, however you prefer to do this, you can live see capacity seat by seat of all of your examinations. Yeah. So this will help a lot with what you were describing there, Salvia, about being able to see how many seats you have at a time, being able to see which modules are there, and so on. The other piece here about allocating certain things at certain times, in my system, again, they're called supervisors, but you might call them invigilators, however you choose to name that. On this screen now, I used to have my capacity. I had 88 out of 100 seats left, but now I see a 001. And what 001 is it's my supervisors. I have no accepted supervisor bookings yet. I haven't scheduled anyone, but based on the exams here and the size, I need one. So my system has rules that tells me how many supervisors I need in certain cases. And it's telling me you need at least one supervisor here. So we do that. This is my scheduled, and here is my available. So let's look at available. And again, now I have the choice to schedule some examiners. Now I'm going to do something a bit different with this now. Obviously, I said that this is one big room, and that's how you can operate it. You could have, for example, one big room like this with a number of different supervisors and allocate them based on certain factors, like, for example, that they're qualified to supervise certain things like, pardon me, supervise certain modules or supervise students with additional needs or qualified for certain things. You could also have people supervising based on their ability to speak certain languages, certain types of exam, whatever you like. So you can filter your supervisors based on any criteria, and you can build those criteria out and use them to allocate your invigilators the way that I'm about to do. But let's say here, I pick my booking, I see my available supervisors, and I'm going to pick this particular supervisor and hit schedule here. Now, what it's going to tell me is this particular session, it goes from 9 till 12, the examination, but I actually require my supervisor to be available from 8 till 1 because there might be some setup, there might be certain things I need to do afterwards. Like you've talked about, your invigilation happens from 10:30 till 4 p.m. and then you've got some seating generation and things that happen afterwards. This can be incorporated in what we'd call a booking request if required. But I'll hit OK, and that places my supervisor here. Now what that does is it will send, if I choose to trigger it, or I can manually automatically do this, it'll send an email to them telling them that they have a booking request that has been made for them, that they need to review and accept or deny, and it will have a certain amount of time for them to be able to accept or deny that. So usually a couple of days, but you can configure that. So if I click here, we see here, for example, I have a date for that expiry. So this is where I might have a specific invigilator that I say, hey, I need you to respond within 5 days. Right. If they deny it, obviously you get a prompt there to be able to then put another invigilator on. If they accept it, it assigns them to the booking, and they're able to have that in their personal calendar. So they know what they're doing as well, so not just students. Now this same logic applies to all of your examinations. And again, generally speaking, institutions will have a variety of different places that they do their examinations. So when we get to that point, it'll be a discussion between yourselves and our experts with implementation as to what the best thing might be for getting a really effective view of all of your space, whether that's a, again, single room like this one here and putting everything in the room, or some sort of zone functionality. And I think the zone functionality would work well for you. And yeah, basically in the zone functionality, you could consider that each of these boxes here is a different zone of your large exam hall. And so where you talk about, for example, row A, seat 1, and then row C seat 1, row E seat 1, and so on, or having all of the odd seats and so on, you could have those zones align to a specific seating configuration and a certain number of seats, and use those as chunks to allocate people into. And again, you will still see the capacity values. So whatever I do, I will always see the available capacity for whatever configuration I choose to use. So we have a number of options as to how we approach this, but that is how we essentially view seating capacity and allocate supervisors where required to specific examinations. Now that we have allocated these examinations to a room, if I head back into the exam and I look at student seat allocation, I have more possibilities. So the way that the system works right now, and what I'm going to show you today, is that you can allocate seats in batches. So for example, I can use this range here to say, give me 10 seats, and then give me the next 2 seats for this group and apply a range automatically. Or I can filter people based on certain categories and then select the students I want to use. So let's say, do these 5 students first because they're in category A, and put them in this examination and hit allocate, and it will give them seats 1 to 5. And then if I do the next lot, I might sort them differently and it will give them seats 5 to 10, for example's sake. Now, currently, we're not able to do things like alphanumeric seating, so you can't have a seat A1, and we don't have buffer zones yet. But both of those things are in our roadmap for this particular product, so that you can generate seats based on a logic. But I would say, in the meantime, the solution that I just described, where having your one big hall set up into zones and having those zones pre-configured with some sort of seat numbers in them, right? Your seat 1 for zone A might correspond to a certain seat. Seat 2 corresponds to a certain seat, and so on. And therefore, you may not necessarily require that functionality in phase 1. So there are some ways around it. But in my world here, I'm just going to allocate these students, and I'll show you what that looks like. So I have 12 students. The easiest way for me to slap these ones in is to say, right, take all my students except those with special needs, and put them in the main examination here. Allocate them. So they've been given ranges 1 to 10. That's where they're sitting. Then I have 2 students left who are not allocated. Of course, I could filter this if I had a larger student numbers to see which students are not allocated and why, and filter them further. But here I'm going to take my students and I'm going to select this examination. And for all of the unallocated students, there we go. Select unallocated, and it gives me all the ones that are unallocated, allocate them. My students are allocated now and given specific ranges. And so that's the process of student seating allocation. Now, that can be done on an individual module level here. Depending on your configuration, you might have other ways that you choose to do that, like broader groupings and things, but it just depends on your data. Generally, the way that it's done is like this, where we have an exam or a room event, and then for all of the things happening in that room event, you can apply the seating. And that might be, as you see here, for different module cohorts, all done in the same space. So for instance, you might search this by the module cohorts and do that range first, and then another module cohort and do the next range, and so on. Alrighty, so that's basic functionality around seating and around invigilator assignment, as well as special needs. There is another piece to show you, which is the supervisor view. So where you do have supervisors that are being scheduled into things as well, you do have a reporting style view where you can see where any of their specific bookings are, like this. See which status those are in, what the due dates are, and so on, and where you're then able to intervene and on an individual basis, contact, or in some cases, you may choose to invalidate certain bookings, or push certain bookings through that process. Lots of different options as to how you might handle some of these things here. So that's the supervisors and invigilators as well. Before I sort of head back in the process now to how we actually get that examination scheduled and know who the student groups are and that sort of thing with the auto scheduler, was there any questions around seating, special needs, or invigilators?
Okay, my question is it possible from the list here, we can print out a student attendance list? That means from that list, can we just print out the name of the student?
In this interface, no. You can currently use our viewer interface, which I'll show you, to, bear with me a second, I'll just grab it up for you. You can use the viewer interface to do reporting of all different sorts. So as an example, this is where also you see your timetable, but you can use it to get a list of, in this case, students who should be attending specific things. And so here I have an example where I have a class, and when that student is caught with your attendance tracking functionality, however you capture your attendance, that information can then be put into TimeEdit against that examination. And you can then report on it to say which students actually attended. In contrast, if you have an examination scheduled, you can have a student group on there, which will tell you which students are in that group. What that gives you if you report is who should be at the exam, but that doesn't give you who attended the exam. So to be clear on that, the current functionality allows you to see who should have attended the exam. And if you capture this information elsewhere, you can bring it into TimeEdit and get who did attend the exam. But we are looking in the next sort of 18 months, but don't hold me to that. My understanding is we're looking to also build in attendance tracking functionality for the examinations native to our system so that you can also capture attendance in our system, not just display attendance that's captured elsewhere.
The seating arrangement just now that you showed to us, is it possible that we can print out instead of from the system? Yeah.
Print out the seating arrangement?
Yes.
Yep.
For student view, because we have to show to student. Instead of maybe we can, let's say you will say we will email to the students, right? The seating arrangement. For another thing, we need another copy to paste it to display for the student.
Yeah, I think we can do one better for you, but just bear with me a second. I'm just going to have a little bit of a look at my system here. I don't know if I have something configured, but I will show you. There is the ability for you to display this to students in multiple ways. So when, I'll just see if this is good. Ah, great. Okay. Bear with me a moment. Awesome. So in TimeEdit, there are two ways to see this. What this is my specific schedule for this examination from the exam module. So rather than having to print it out, this information, so for example, for this individual student, right, and their seating allocation, so Cotton here, her seat is seat 11, right, for this exam at this time. So rather than printing this out, you can have this personalized information accessible to them using their student code or a variety of other mechanisms. You don't even need the code necessarily. You can just tie this to the individual student, and this can be made accessible through their personal schedule in our viewer system. So for example, a student might look at a schedule that looks a bit like this. Now, this is a lecture, but let's for argument's sake say that this is an examination. On any event, we can have links. And here I have an example of a link to a video lecture, but this could instead be linked to examination seating. And that would link to this page, which gives them their personal seat. And this, which might be any additional information like, please do not bring water bottles that you cannot see through. Please do not bring calculators or whatever it might be. You then do not need to do a hard copy of that seating arrangement.
Jordan, can we get this information through API also? We show in our mobile app also?
Good question. The current state, I will need to clarify for you if you can pull student seat information out of the examination module. But certainly anything that is shown here can be pulled via API. So a link or something like that could, in theory, be pulled via API and then displayed in your module, in your app, for them to navigate to. But the actual information itself of you are in seat 11, I will need to clarify, as it is a little more restricted in exam.
Okay, because it's easier for us because our concept not to bring everything to the mobile app rather than they jump from one platform to other.
Yeah, for sure, and we're on board with that too. There is another piece to this here, so we're actually currently putting a fair bit of work into developing this exam module with a number of institutions working alongside us, and some of those benefits that we're talking about are things like improving the access to information through our API for things like what you've just described. We want students to only have to go to one place, and if that means that they don't have to navigate away from, for example, their viewer interface here to see their seat and time and requirements and everything, they should see it in one place. That is what our vision is as well, is that students don't need to jump between. It's also quite common for institutions who do have an app like yourselves, and that is their central place for students. It's quite common for them to consume that sort of information and display it in their app. So it would make sense for us to be able to make that information available for you. Cool. Alrighty. Any further questions on the exam piece so far before we jump over to how we scheduled it?
Okay, just now, Jordan, you're showing the seat allocation. Okay,
Mhm.
so like for example, can I do it not based on student ID, based on the module? Like normally
Mhm.
now we don't deal with student, we just the exam unit, they don't recognize the student. They just know this intake, this module got 20 students, so arrange seat for them.
Mhm.
So they don't deal with student ID or student name or student. So they
Sure.
just need to know how many students and which intake and which module they have the exam and which
Yeah.
date. So that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. So see here, I have this exam field. Now in my database, this is actually the module that I've got, right? So this is the module examination here. So in theory, I could definitely do it via module just using this data, but you might also have a field, which is a module field, for example, that you can sort like this one. So I have a number of different, student code ID values here for illustration purposes, but you might instead have some sort of module group, right? And then that way you just allocate 20 seats for module group ABC123, just like you've described. And you can sort, if you have, say, 300 students, you might sort them by modules and group them by modules when you allocate.
Okay. Can be this process more on automated because my exam hall is fixed. So I just need to tell I have this exam,
Mhm.
this module, this intake, this number of students, this day.
Mhm.
And it should do the allocation automatically rather than you showing now I have to do it like for each exam. Can be automated every time. I just feed the data or upload one time. So
Mhm.
the setting will be arranged automatically for all exam.
Yeah, great question. In the current system, no. In the near future, that is our expectation. We are looking at building that into the exam module because that's a similar thing for a lot of institutions.
Yeah.
They don't have any special seating considerations, just seat the students. So if you don't
Yeah.
have a lot
We
of the
do,
special
we do,
needs,
we do have sitting consideration, like I mentioned for you, we have like same module, it has to follow the odd number of row, like we have row 1, row 3, row 4, row 5, like for the same module. Cannot be all the like 1, 2, 3, the same module. It should be one row gap between the student from the same module. So
Mhm.
for this rule is one time rule, like we configure it one time, then every time there is a new student or new exam, you just follow the same rule. So the engine no need to train. Like now we are trying to do the manual arrangement. Every time I have to arrange the setting while I already know the configuration one time. So I just run it every time should follow the same way.
Yeah, so currently, no. That is something we are building, though. I don't have an exact date to share with you today because we are prioritizing that work currently. But we can come back to you on that. But yes, currently it's something that you don't have to do the process that I did here every time, where I individually picked groups and then ran a couple of steps every time. We do have what's called simple seat allocation, where we say there are 12 students. There are 2 students with special needs, for example. Seat them. And it just gives them a seat number. But I do still, right now, need to click that button to say, give me seat numbers. It is a faster process, but it's not completely automated currently. But that's the current options you have this way, or the just generate me seat numbers. Now, just to be clear again, the seat numbers that we have here in our system are always numerical currently, is, say 1 to 12. But the way that we can get around the requirement that you have there about having, odd numbers and that sort of thing is potentially creating zones that we use for our examinations, where those zones might be your, A1, C1, E1, and so on seats that you use every time. As you said, your exam hall is fixed. So that's the current way that this could work.
Okay, good.
Wonderful. All right. Any further questions on this before we do jump into auto scheduling?
Okay, from here I don't see the like my exam hall is like mentioned just now is 400 plus. So after I already run this, how I know where is the empty seat, how much the utilization of the hall? Like I want to know how many, if I can shuffle them some of the exam, like because normally we follow the exam hall capacity. So if I have 400 students, so I just arrange for my hall is 450 and I have 400 students who need to attend the exam, then I allocate. So, but after I do this arrangement, can I know the utilization for the hall?
Yep, absolutely. So that can be done in 2 ways. Currently, you can view in this interface where I can see, again, whether it's one big room or whether it's zones. Here is where I see how many seats I have for this time slot, right? You might have multiple time slots that you use, for example. So my morning, my afternoon, and I can see where I have rooms available, where I have the seats available, which exams are being given in those slots, and see that capacity. I can also see it in a timeline view. So if I have a number of rooms, I might just select the one room that I'm working with here and go to the date that I was on so that we can see that illustrated. Great. So I can see where I have certain amounts of exams. So here I have 2 exams in this time slot, and I might have a number of additional exams, and I can see whether I'm overbooked. I can see a lot of additional information about how many students my capacity looks like, and so on. So I have a number of different ways I can view this, but what I would probably recommend is that the way that we would control making sure that you don't go over capacity is that during the scheduling process in core, we allocate the room or the space appropriately for each student group. And we allow the auto scheduling engine to do that.
Yeah. Sound good.
Wonderful. Awesome. Any further questions there, team?
Sylvia?
So far, no.
Wonderful.
Our side.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. Okay. All right. So the next stage of the demonstration, I'd like to talk about auto scheduling and what's required for auto scheduling, whether it's classes or examinations. As you'll recall in the last demonstration, I think it might have been Surinder, we had a great discussion with around the quality of data that's required in order to do auto scheduling and how much is needed and what sort of structures we need it in. And so I will talk to you about the tool we have to help with that, to structure that data appropriately and to get that data through into our auto scheduling engine. What I have in front of me is an example of an exam that's been auto scheduled. I'm going to use a class example just because I have more data to work with and to show you some more possibilities of the tool. Just before I do jump into that though, I'll just double check. Is everyone okay to continue? Do we need a quick 5-minute break? How are people feeling?
It's okay to continue.
Yep,
Okay.
wonderful. All right. So starting from the start of this process, what we need to do in terms of any sort of intake that you've got is you'll collect, whether it's classes, examinations, you're doing some data collection as you've talked about, you've got, course structures that you're collecting information on, whether that's class durations, exam durations, and you're doing a lot of keying information into different places. What our tool here can do, this tool is called Preferences. This can capture information on any kind of activity, teaching or non-teaching, and can allow that information to be put in one place and used for scheduling and not have to be replicated anywhere else. So it's centralizing all of your data and it's putting it in one place. So what I have here in front of me is a form. Now you can have different configurations of forms all happening at the same time. But when you have a form, usually what you do with a form is you'll send it out to an individual who will receive that form and be able to then either enter data into the form based on the rules you set up, or they will be expected to verify that the data that is already there is correct and then submit it. Before I jump into the form, I'll show you where that data goes. All right. Once a person would verify or add data and submit it, it goes in here into our auto scheduling engine and it sits and waits until we're ready to schedule it. All right. So it's a native integration and the data that you've collected goes directly into here to be
Jordan,
used for scheduling.
are you showing us something? Because for me, I cannot
Oh, goodness me. Oh, that's horrible. I had my screen share frozen. I'm sorry. Yes. So that would be why. Sorry about that. So this is the form I was just talking about. And we're going to talk about a structure that you can use to collect data. And this is the place that it goes to where we were before. So this here in the top of the screen, this is an example of some of the things that get generated when you collect any sort of scheduling requirements, whether it be class or examinations. The last example you saw was an examination. This example here is a more complicated one that is about classes, just to give you an idea of the feature capability. And this is what it generates. And we're then able to schedule it. I'm going to unschedule this because we're going to schedule it again later. I'm going to show you what that looks like when we do that. Beautiful. All right, so just to give you an idea of how easy the system is to work with, it's been unscheduled. Great. Okay, so let's now jump into the collection of data. Again, class, examinations, or both, and how we can do this. So this is a specific module. All right. Now this might be because our system can handle that API and information coming from external sources. If you know who's teaching this subject or who's responsible for giving you this data, this form can automatically be sent to that person based on the module value. Yeah. That person receives a form. Now, if you've done this in a previous period, we can use that to populate this form already. So they may not even need to enter any data here as a first time, but you may, depending on your data quality and structure, need to enter data in here once to say, for example, I have a lecture, I have workshops, I have tutorials, and maybe I have also examinations. And I might put an exam. Where are we? Examination. Yep, great. Now, I can enter any information that you want to enter here. So this form is configurable by yourselves. So these are just some examples of some of the fields you might place in here. Now, obviously, a lot of the ones that are in here that are related to class are around things like the room type you might need for the class or the campus on which that class should be taught, building, equipment, and that sort of thing. But you might make this quite simple where examination can automatically populate values like the exam hall on the main campus. That may be a pre-populated value. You may also have certain modules that are delivered with other modules, and this co-taught value could also be populated, whereby if an examination is to be delivered with multiple other modules at the same time, let's say it's the same examination, maybe it's the different intakes, same exam, or whether it's, same exam across different modules, whatever that might be, this system can support pre-filling based on certain values. Again, you just need to have the source data somewhere that the system can use to inform this. Now, in my case, I do have some source data. As you can see, I've got a little blue bubble here. And when I hover over it, it tells me that the value that's in this field is pre-filled based on my subject. Now, the subject here is what you call your module. Yep. So based on this module, it knows I have 50 students that I'm expected this particular period, say semester. I have 50 enrolled students. And so when I look at my class sizes, they need to align to that, right? I'm going to put all my students in the exam, and my exam goes for 3 hours. Now, again, I don't need to necessarily fill this in. If it's documented somewhere else, it can be pre-filled, and this doesn't need to be manually done, but I'm just giving you an indication. Similarly, I have room types here. And based on what I'm talking about, I might have certain combinations. Now, I'm doing something on the fly for you here, so I don't have the option of examination hall, but I might just untick a box and just see if I've got some. No, I don't. But if I had an examination hall that was valid as an option here, then I would select examination hall. For argument's sake, let's pick lecture theatre. Now, something to note. The way that this system works, again, for class or exams, I think this will be a benefit for you in either case. If someone gives you requirements, the requirements that they've already picked must be a valid combination with anything else they pick later, because you don't want someone to say, I need a classroom with an ice cream machine if you don't have any classrooms with ice cream machines. I believe we talked about this example when we were looking at our manual scheduling in our last demonstration. If we look here at, say, lecture theatre, and I click equipment, you can see I have 4 different equipment options. I have computer, projector, wheelchair accessible, and whiteboard. Yeah. And if I click campus, I have 2 options for campus. The reason I see 2 options for campus and 4 options for equipment is that because I've only picked lecture theatre, I have lecture theatres in 2 different campuses, and they have 4 different equipment values that I could pick from. If I get rid of lecture theatre though, I'm now saying, I just want an exam. See, I have 4 campuses. That's because I have 4 campuses to pick from. And as I pick some of these campuses, the room options and the equipment options and the building options become more restricted to make sure that when I pick those items, it is a valid combination of things that could actually be scheduled. Now, in your case with the examination halls, this isn't as much of a feature consideration, obviously, because you've got 1 exam hall. But some of the things that this could be useful for are ensuring that modules are being taught at the same time, potentially, or modules are being examined at the same time, potentially. Or if you're using the same form to capture class and exam requirements, which could work with your process based on what you described, you could use this very well for class scheduling requirement capture to capture a lot of information in a really short space of time and making sure that it's really high quality. And this is the first step into something like, for example, auto scheduling. I'm going to pick some items here so we have this all set up. Give you an idea of how quick it is. Have our placeholder teacher. Great. Okay. Now, the next step in this process, once we've done this, is to head over to this weeks section. And so this is the structure of the course. So I have, for example, a lecture in week 1 or week 9 of my calendar. Then the next week I have a lecture, something here, and I'll explain that in a sec, and then tutorial. And then I have a lecture and tutorial, and so on until I have a workshop every few weeks. And I can see that structure here. So this is where I'm actually aligning things and sequencing them. This is not the best view of everything that's happening. I have a better view for that in a moment. But this is where I can say the lecture should happen before the workshop, or the workshop should happen before the lecture. Or I can say, right, my examination week might be week 21, for example. And this is where the examination should happen. Yeah. The thing that I have here with the numbers, this is actually minimum time between activities. So again, speaking where this would be useful for both class and exams together, if you have a lecture and then you want a tutorial after that, but you want at least, say, a day between them, that's what this is saying. This is saying, set it up so that it is lecture, then tutorial, but there is at least 1 day between them. You might also have set it up so there's lecture and tutorial, but there is at least 3 hours and 30 minutes between them. You can get very granular with this. Yeah. So this allows you to have this information as part of your input and for the system to then use that during auto scheduling. This is very powerful because you don't necessarily have to do this every time. If you've done this in a previous period, I'll show you when we get out of this screen, we can roll this over to a new period, taking all that information, pre-filled form, and allowing people just to verify that that form is still valid and that there's still the stuff they want in that form. Alrighty, I mentioned that there is a better view of everything that's happening. This is the first version of that, the all activity screen. And this tells us everything that's happening one by one with all of the different pieces. So where we had, for example, lecture, and it was a lecture basically every week, we can see that it's generated here. Lectures, in which week it's generated them. And this allows us, if we have individual classes within a sequence of activities. So say, for example, I've got 10 lectures. The first lecture, I know that I have more students. And then students start dropping off for the second lecture onwards. They stop coming up. You know, say 10% of students don't turn up, right? I need a bigger room for the first lecture. So I can do that. I increase the max class size here to 60, for argument's sake. This allows you to capture these requirements, again, from the people who probably know this stuff well before the scheduling process has to happen. And you do not have to fix this later or have any conversation with them if you don't need to. This allows them to give you these requirements. They don't have to do this, but it allows you to capture it. The next piece, of course, is the review, where I'm able to see, here's my entire structure for this module. I have lectures, tutorials, workshops, and exams. This is the duration I have total. So this is how many teaching hours of lectures I'm doing. And this is for one student. So noting I might have multiple groups, right, within my intake. And so here I have tutorial. I have 2 tutorials, max of 25 for this module. I have 5 workshops, 5 workshop groups. So I'm giving 10 hours of workshops, but a student individually only gets 2 hours, right? So real granularity as to what you're looking at and allows you to then actually view this and structure it, right? You can also filter any of these views to be able to view groups of it and make sure that you're seeing everything you need before this gets submitted. So this gives your, whether it's your academics or administrative staff or whoever else provides your input data, this gives them the ability to be really clear about what they're giving you. And then they can hit submit and submit this to you. And just to go full circle again, this then comes in here and sits here, not scheduled, waiting for you to use our auto scheduler to schedule this. All right. Before I show you how we can configure some of these forms and what you will be able to do as schedulers and administrators in this tool, did you have any questions on the form for academics or administrators?
Jordan, just to understand what's happening here, are you jumping to the course schedule or the class schedule? I mean, are we done in the exam scheduling or, I mean, because I see we going out from the exam scheduling. I mean, you started adding the exam part of the class schedule, but I see now we reach somewhere else. Is it part of the flow or more focused?
That's a great question. So it's actually both. So this tool that I'm showing you, this process, can be used for both class and examination scheduling. It can be done separately or it can be done together. So I've just shown you an example of where you could capture for one module both the class and examination scheduling requirements and auto schedule the whole thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's 2 in 1 in different words. It's this feature applied for class and exam.
Yeah. And then the auto schedule can be used for class and exam.
So you fit up because last time yeah, we remember that we asked you this question, can we put one gap between the lecture and the tutorial, and can we put the lecture always first, then after that the tutorial? Last time Mr. Surinder asked these questions. So I believe this one answer our question last time. We can put always lecture first and put gap 1 hour, then after that the tutorial.
Exactly. Yes, absolutely.
This one-time configuration, once it's set up for this specific module, it will not need every time I have to run this engine to reconfigure it. It's one-time configuration. Then
Correct. Absolutely. I think the actual solution I gave Mr. Surinder last time was more robust for what you're talking about. We have another way of doing that in our system where we set a rule for everything or a rule for everything of a certain type. And so I think what I explained to Mr. Surinder last time is we had this idea of padding, where if we have a lecture and we have a tutorial for the same module, there should always be 1 hour gap, and we can set that as a rule rather than having to capture it in this form. You can still do it either way. So this allows you to do it if you wanted to customize the time or to have a different set of criteria for, say, this module rather than another module. But that rule that sits underneath everything, that can also be a universal rule that applies to all modules or to a group of modules or to a group of people, whatever you might want to do, to save you having to reconfigure it more than once.
so I assume this form only for like lecturer or for who's like who want to change the rule of this module or how the
Exactly.
so they want
Exactly.
to
They tell you what they need.
then if it's accepted, then it will apply as a rule for the engine. Yeah.
Basically, yes. Yeah, basically, this is where you get your scheduling constraints and criteria. This is all of the input information. So where you do your data collection in Excel right now, and you do a lot of work on that data before you put it into Unitime, this replaces that whole process of having to go to people to get that information, to put it into Excel and, massage and work on that information before you put it into Unitime. This allows you to pre-validate that information and allows you to do this in a way that does not require loading into any additional system. It is all integrated in the same system.
But like this way, every lecturer will change the rule based on their preference. So is it gonna mess up all the rule in the engine?
No. So there are 2 reasons why that will not happen. And a third, if you want to go there, you can have a way. So see how I have these steps, right? Start, and then I go through those options. I have a review and submit. There is an option for you to be able to set these forms up so that an academic might only see up to review and they have to hit save. Yeah. And there might be someone at a higher level of approval who gets this submit button. Only when this button is submitted does this go to the scheduling team and wait for it to be used in auto scheduling. I want to be clearer though, it's still not being used for auto scheduling. You still have the ability to analyze the information here in a variety of ways. And you also have the ability to say, right, this submission here for this module broke the rules, or you've changed too much, or I just don't like you. And you can use this to click rejected. You can do this individually or on bulk. This then can be used to say, you broke the rules, fix it.
Yeah, the
We can
rules
note.
actually in the main engine, like the engine, I put generic university rules. So once this
I use a
this form, I have to decide myself rather than I mean, is there a way that it show which conflict, where is conflict with the university rule that you configured earlier? So then I can decide better. Right now, it's maybe short term. I see, oh, it's no problem. Look, no issue. But actually, long term, it's affect the whole process.
For sure, for sure. What I would suggest is that you can restrict. In that form, I had access to see everything because I'm a super user. You may restrict some or a lot of that form to be either hidden or read only for the academic. So they can see that when they pick an examination, it will always be 3 hours, and potentially there are certain rules around that you have already set. If they want to change those, they will need to go through an approval process. They cannot directly change that and change your data that you're using to schedule if you want to do that. So you can have approval processes there to stop what you're describing happening. I would recommend then that it means you don't need to have as many visualization tools because the data is high quality when you get it, and you restrict what people are able to do before they submit the data.
Yeah, sound good. Maybe also restrict only for the program leader or the academic leader who can
Yeah.
submit forms.
Yeah, that's actually a really common thing, and it's probably a good thing for me to show you now. So this is behind the scenes. This is what you would see in this tool, or your teams would see in this tool, right? This could be your class scheduling and your exam scheduling team, depending on how you do your forms, right? So you may both have accesses to this. What I see here is actually the form I was just looking at. I was looking at that particular version of this form. But let's say for argument's sake, I want to do what we've just described, where only a program leader can submit the form, but an academic, a general academic, can see the form, edit the form to a certain degree based on the permissions. They cannot submit it without approval of that program leader. We have this feature over here called collaboration, right? So let me put myself in here. And then let's also put in.
Can we put role or groups then who belong to this group can see? Because now that one of the issue that we're facing, the name management, they keep changing like AL or program leader. So we keep
Sure thing.
need the name. While if we put in the group, so we change only the group in name, the name in that group, then automatically reflect in all system. This is
Yep.
how we do change.
Yeah, so I have here recipient groups that you can also use. So I just did individual recipients because I don't have any groups with your roles in there, but I do have some groups and I could use a recipient group. So I'm saying that the owner here, this is the person who's capable of submitting. The non-owner is capable of viewing and potentially editing, but not submitting. And so this person needs to give approval and review before it gets to you. And this might be your program leader. And so you set that person, all your program leader group, everyone in that appropriate group gets access to view and submit. And the actual academics themselves are responsible for just adding data, verifying where it's required, and saving that for the program leaders to review and submit. So definitely possible, and definitely possible to do via groups.
Okay, sound good.
Awesome. I love it. Now, there is another piece I want to show you here briefly. So we have half an hour left, which will be enough time for me to show you some of the things we can do with the form to give you an idea of the flexibility. And then we jump into some auto scheduling, which is actually quite quick because we have data to auto schedule with. So here's an example of a form. All of these different forms here, I can edit. I can clone them for different uses. I can also roll them over. So where I talked about lifting a form and bringing all of that to a new period, including some of the activity submissions, this is the process I would use if I wanted to take, for example, last intake or last semester, and all of the modules from that period, bring all of that work to the next period, and send it back out to everyone to say, right, check that it's still good, change what you need to change, otherwise submit it, and we will auto schedule. And you go through the same approval process if you want to. But what this means is that that team then, instead of having to do 10 minutes work, they have to do 30 seconds work, and you get data that is clean and you know can schedule. Yeah. Now, we are also looking at in the next, actually releasing this year, but very soon, we have a new feature we're building where we can take the actual scheduled things. So not the forms and the things that people requested at this stage, which is at the front of the process, the actual scheduled activities, and turn those into a form to send out. The reason that that's important is because you mentioned that you do a lot of changes. And if you've made changes, you can capture those changes in the form and send those out to people. Because if you have to keep making changes, that indicates that potentially the input data is bad or has some sort of piece missing. And what you can do when you revert those scheduled reservations to a form like this is that you send those out to people so that they can capture those and check that that's more accurate potentially. Yeah. All right.
Cleaning this data in Excel now. Yes. You're doing this, you're sending for the head of school or the email that we have this issue. then they have to fix again, isn't it? At the beginning of every intake. You're sharing Excel sheet between everybody. Yeah. Then they have to fix it.
Yeah.
And yeah. So maybe this can be the process. So a form will be sent for them. They will have to fix it. Then reply back to it.
Yep. And the other thing to note on this as well, in contrast to Excel is obviously difficult to do any sort of permissions control. So visibility of other people's things, changing other people's cells, these sorts of things. None of that can happen here because only the people who are eligible with permissions to get, say, for example, a form for a certain module, only that person or the people in the group that we talked about would get that. I cannot go and look at, if I'm a normal academic, and so are you, Mustafa, I can't go navigating through the system to look for the modules that you're teaching to see what you're requesting so that I can also request it. I can't do that. That's not possible in the system. We would both need to be teachers on that module or both need to be in the groups, and the permissions would need to allow that. So our system is very tightly controlled with permissions, and that is another big benefit we find for institutions coming from Excel to preferences is that things are much more secure.
Yep.
Another big benefit is that with Excel, you do not have automatic reminders. Our system is fully equipped with automatic reminders. So as you approach the due date for data collection submission, automatic reminders can be sent. Yep. This can also include things like public holidays. So we can have public holidays displayed and we can allow or disallow reservations by default on public holidays, if you like. And that can, of course, include Malaysian holidays. So we actively maintain this, and you can also add unavailabilities to that as well, if you choose.
You can
All
add
right.
holiday also. Like we have extra holidays also sometimes.
Yep, for sure. All right. Now, what we also then get to do here, just as a bit of a basic thing here, we'll look at the structure of the form and you can understand what I can change. So I've got at the top here, we've got some things to get you started. So it's like a Google form. You start with a main purpose for what your form is. So whether it's going to be a table, whether it's going to be a calendar that you can paint into, because you can do that too, or whether it's going to be like a form itself. Then we can bring some things in. So I started with a table. And based on the table, it's telling me, well, you're going to need all of these different things. Here's some settings. But then you need to actually populate that table with stuff. And so you will have noticed in my form I had, for example, what kind of activity is it? Is it a lecture, tutorial, an examination, and so on? That's my activity type. But the thing that makes this system work is it's not just an activity type, and I'm not just being able to type what I want. I'm saying you need to make this field display values from my database for the activity type object. Actually show only the data in my database as valid selections. So the things you get in this form are pre-validated data using this data source element. And that can be whatever you like, and you can call it whatever you like. So for example, if I bring one in, drag one in, this is how I build a form, by the way. I'll just drag an element in, call it what I like. You can see all of the different things I have in my database that I could use here to map. And it's not just the objects themselves. It's not just saying, for example, which individual module, but it might be selections like which campus is that module being taught on. So its attributes and field values can also be included. If I'm picking a teacher, I might not necessarily need a teacher. I might need a qualification set. That's what I'm picking in this value to inform my auto scheduler, because these can be used as rules when you're auto scheduling. When it gives me a teacher for a class or an invigilator for an examination, it needs to be someone with competency set of this. Yeah. In that way, it allows you to then capture requirements without having to know exactly who it is every time that you want in mind.
So
Of
in
course,
this form, you are just showing how the lecturer can add extra field or customize field for the forms to be submitted, correct?
No, to be clear, this is not what the lecturer gets. This is your access. This is access for you and your team. They do not get access to this because this is how we build and modify the forms themselves. This is a system administrator.
This system administrator access to design the form that allow the lecturer to submit.
Correct. Exactly. Yes. As you build that form out, you have a live preview here as well, where we can see what it looks like, and I can see the fields. So let's say I go back in here and I do again what I did, where I very quickly show you how easy it is. And let's make it about rooms, and let's make it the building, for example.
Can be
then
different for each module. Like each module, like design school different than the IT school, different than the business school. So each one get
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I would recommend from seeing this used by a number of institutions, right? And some really big ones, like University of Melbourne or KU Leuven, some really big ones. I'd recommend that you usually end up with something like 4 to 6 different forms that cover everyone's requirements. There are very few things that you would have in a form that in one section, one faculty really can't have that the other faculty want. You just don't use that element. It's usually the case. But you can have a million forms if you want to. It's just that you have to remember you need to maintain a million forms. That's all. So we give you the keys to the castle. You can have as many forms as you like concurrently. They can all happen at the same time or overlapping times. It's up to you. But we would recommend, for good practice, probably no more than 10 at a time, just because then you and your team will never sleep.
Okay.
Cool. Now, you'll see, Mustafa, we were playing with our form. We added a field. Here it is. And hopefully it works like it should. We were looking for, yeah, great. This value was mapped to the building values in my database for the different buildings that I have for rooms. And here are the different buildings that I have for rooms. It's done exactly what it should do. So I can't type in, magical building. I can't do that. You probably can't see me, but here we go, magical building. All right, I can't type in whatever I like and then go to the next field. See, it's cleared it for me. I'm not able to give you anything like that. Similarly, this building is called Bell Hall, right? Let's say I know what I want. I'm going to type it out, Bell Hall, but I misspell it, right? I haven't fully spelled it. It clears that value for me. Of course, it was showing me live the value, and I can click on that, and I can use that. Or I can type it correctly, and it will also use that. But unless it's a valid option, it doesn't let me keep it. And that's important because then you don't have to keep cleaning your data. It means the person who's submitting it has to give you good data. And you're defining what good data looks like. So I think in terms of saving time for your process, a lot of the time saving will be some of the things that you already do that you have to do, right? Which is getting a lot of that Excel work done before you feed it into uni time. This cuts that down significantly if we use these tools correctly.
They send you a request through email and change. Then no need email here, you can track everything.
Correct. Yes. Also, I think we talked about it in the last session, but as I think we mentioned at the end of last session, we have the integrated change request flow, which if I show you briefly might ring a bell. This being our timetable viewer, wherever we had a class on the schedule. Let's say, for example, this is a staff member we're talking about here. We had a class on that schedule and they needed to make a change, right? They can click the class on their schedule and they can request a change. I believe you might recall this now if I show that, where we request a change and this flows through to your team. Again, no email. And it goes into a queue system for you to manage in the scheduling system and do approvals or denials and whatnot with live class control.
No lecturer complain why you missed my email.
Because I ignored it. That's the answer. Because you have a better system for that. So that's the preferences forms. So that's how we collect the data. Now I understand we spent a lot of time here talking about data collection, and we're about to jump into auto scheduling. The reason I've done that, and I think you understand from this, Mustafa, from our conversation, is that the way we get good auto scheduling and the way we set up our engine basically is with the input data. So that is where the time is. That is where we should focus. The actual act of scheduling, once we know that this data is good, should be nothing more than really clicking a button or prioritizing certain things in the data to be weighted against each other in certain ways, right? So let's look at that, and that will probably take us to time today. Before I go across to that, were there any more questions on the preferences module and some of the capabilities for this?
Can I upload data in bulk like now or anything just now? I just back to the exam schedule.
Yep.
So I can upload in data in bulk rather than I key in one by one.
Yes, absolutely. I would recommend you do one better, and that these forms here can be populated with values through API. So yeah, you can upload via bulk, but you might be better off bringing that core data in via API and verifying that data structure basically through preferences and using that to schedule. Or where it's not something you collect on, it's something that just sits underneath everything, like say your facilities data, you just bring that in via API.
For Dixon, can you ask like how we can allocate the exam? Like sometimes it needs to be back to back in one day, or perhaps it's going to be 2 days break between each exam or same intake.
Okay, there's like one case maybe we can face. Some student complain why I have 3 exams in one day, or why my exam is all in 1 week while the whole exam duration it should be in 2 weeks. Why you compress my exam in 3 days? Why you give me 3 module in 3 days or 3 module in 2 days? Like, so
Yep.
how we can put this very tight schedule or keep the gap? Like if this student got 1 exam at the first day, give 1 day gap, then the third day give him the second module, then give gap another day, then give him. So are we able to do so?
Yes. So when I talked earlier about having we looked at the, you know what, I'll show you so that we know we're talking about the same thing. Remember I talked about this element here where we can put a break, right? And I said there was another way where we had a rule that we could apply to everything of a certain kind to say, do activity A and then have, say, a day break and then do activity B, right? You might have this applying to every student that they cannot have back-to-back examinations. For example, there must be at least 1 day's gap. Alternatively, you might have that all activities of a certain type, so say all examinations, but classes might be a different rule, right? So all examinations only, there must be a maximum of 2 per week,
Okay,
or a
so
maximum of 6 hours per week.
because this one is showing module based, while the student is like the consideration based on student based, not module based. So one
Correct.
student have 3 modules like at the same day or come back together.
That is a different interface. So we're going to get into something that's not something I usually show in a demonstration, but I'm happy to do it. Bear with me a moment.
Because we receive this nowadays, this complaint mainly on the classes arrangement or the exam arrangement also.
Yeah, exactly. So let's look at this. We have this concept called dynamic availability. And what that does is it says, I don't care which day I have off, for example, but I need what we do here is this example of a research day. This is saying, I don't care what day I have off, but as a teacher, I need at least 1 day a week or 2 days a week to do research, right? So when my schedule gets automatically generated, the system must keep, say, for example, 2 days free. All right. Now, in order to do that for a teacher, right, I need to have some certain criteria I can apply. I also need to be able to apply which days and what the values are. This same concept can be used for all different sorts of things, like, for example, students. Now, I have some time intervals here. I might have certain hours per day or days per week or hours per week of a certain thing. But I'm going to say here that I need at least, for my students, let's say I'm going to say Monday to Friday being the teaching week. It could be Monday to Saturday, or Sunday to Thursday, whatever we choose. I need at least 1 day free. That is one way that we can handle some of these cases, and we say it's students by aligning that with certain values, like for example, students who have a certain field value, right? So let's say I'll just pick one for argument's sake here. Students on this campus would have this rule applied to them. Now, of course, you would use a different kind of field like the rule itself. Yeah. So it should be 1 day break rule or something. That's one way you can do this. And then each student gets given a value, either automatically or manually. That's one way you can handle this. The other piece you talked about having certain amount of time between classes, I've mentioned that this can be done as a fundamental rule, and this is what this looks like. So much like the last one, here I have some padding rules. So what this is saying is, for example, I want at least an hour between reservations of a certain type that occur at these times. So in this rule, it's saying anything that happens between 12 and 2, students must have at least 1 hour for lunch. And the system will automatically ensure they have at least 1 hour for lunch between 12 and 2. And I can set the conditions under which this occurs. This same function can be used to have at least half an hour between classes, or to have travel time accounted for wherever there's a difference.
Jordan, this hour can be ranged, like it cannot, like now, from you put, for example, from 12 to 2. So it can from 12 to 1, or can be from 1 to 2, or can be in between, like 12:30 to 1:30, correct?
Yep,
will not be,
absolutely.
because now we have peak hours, like everybody go to lunch together and everybody leaves, so it will be like chaos, and it's very, so it should be spread the traffic in.
And that's what this is doing. It's a great point. So Mustafa, what this does is it says for all students, when you're scheduling, make sure that the students get at least 1 hour sometime between 12 and 2. And so for a student one day, that might be 12 to 1. That might be 12:30 to 1:30. It might be 1 till 2, for example.
That's good.
Yeah. And it's dynamic, hence the name. So the way that it works is it will automatically do that for you. It will automatically consider that for you in the scheduling if you apply that rule, and you don't have to think about it, and it doesn't have to be the same every time.
Okay. Okay, how about if I want to apply this rule for exam only, where I can choose where activity for exam only?
Yeah, for sure. So I have all different sorts of values that I have here, right? If I have activity types, right? So say, for example, examination, I might have a value where it is, this should apply for any student, right? This is the object it's talking about. So students should have some sort of value here for students, but I also need it to apply only when there is an examination.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
So you can apply cascading conditions to this to get it really granular.
Nice.
Wonderful.
Jordan,
Yes.
Gideon here.
Hey, Gideon.
What is it like? This looks like it's a hard constraint. Is it possible to make it a soft constraint as well? That means the auto scheduler will bend or break the rule if it needs to.
That is a brilliant question. My understanding of this rule is that it's a hard constraint. However, you can apply this as a soft constraint if that constraint comes from the data collection like this. So there are two different kinds of padding. What I just showed you here is a padding rule that applies to everything of a certain type that meets the conditions, right? And applies all the time to those types of things based on the conditions we set, yeah? This is padding between certain activities. Right now, our system in the auto scheduler, and this is probably a great way to jump into it, has a number of things you can use to control whether a constraint is hard or soft. These are some of these toggles that you have for control. And as you see here, I have a padding control, but it is for activity padding. So the padding coming through in the data collection forms. The ones in the rule set are hard constraints. I can say though, that if you have the permissions and something can't be met based on padding, you could override that if you have the permissions, but you must have the permissions in order to do so. Yeah?
Okay.
No worries. Were there any further questions on that adding functionality? Just thinking we've got 6 minutes, which is still enough time to talk about auto scheduling. But I do want to cover any questions you have first.
Okay, just to continue your answer for this topic regarding the soft consent, can I apply bulk like soft consent like in all modules, or I can specify list of modules that just put this soft consent, because you said just now the rule is hard consent. So if I want to make it soft, I have to apply for 20 modules or 100 modules. These modules only make sure 1 hour gap, but actually not necessarily. If there is conflict and an allocated room, then you just ignore this rule, make it soft code. So can I apply one rule across all module or specific modules?
That is a great question. So you can apply the rule across one module or specific modules that we just showed, the lunchtime rule, right? But the thing with that lunchtime rule is that will pick any 1 hour between 12 and 2, right? And that is a hard constraint. If you want it to be able to be soft, it needs to be a time. And the way you could do that is this. I have this concept in our database called availability, right? Where I can say when something is available or unavailable. And that can be a soft unavailability. And so I can essentially say for all of the modules of a certain type, right? So maybe I pick a heap of modules or a program or whatever grouping of things, I might paint in my calendar that I want it to avoid scheduling them between 12 and 2. If it must, it can, but I want a soft constraint to avoid scheduling them between 12 and 2. Yeah. And then I apply all of the modules that are relevant to this soft unavailability. To give you an idea of what the soft unavailability actually looks like and how it acts, I've got a teacher who likes playing golf on Thursdays. And so when I look at his calendar, all right, it's not super obvious in my interface. Bear with me a moment. Make it nice and clear. Still not super clear. This box here is a soft unavailability, as you can see if you're from the hovering over. This person is soft unavailable for the 8 till 3 on Thursdays because he plays golf. But if he must be scheduled to teach, he can be. And as you can see, for some of those weeks, he has been scheduled to teach. This is a 6-week period. He has been scheduled to teach on some Thursday mornings because that's where it had to fit. But he doesn't have to teach on those days. Yeah?
Yep.
Awesome.
Okay.
That same concept can be used for modules, rooms, literally anything. Yeah. The main distinction being, though, you will need to pick a time for that soft unavailability as opposed to letting the system pick the times for you.
Can
All
I,
right.
after I do the schedule, you want to add more, Jordan?
No, you go, you go.
Okay. Suddenly this room unavailable, the projector doesn't work or the network or no light for this room for temporary for 1 session or few sessions for day, half day, or so how we can rearrange the classes that happening that time
Great question.
for
The
1
easiest
week?
way,
1 session.
1 week, yeah. So I have something called a reservation list. Super powerful. It lets me see all of the reservations for a certain time that meet certain criteria and lets me see them in the calendar or do bulk operations to them, right? So let's say I have a week. Let's say it's this week. I'm hoping I have reservations in this week. By goodness. What's the first day? 27th to the 31st. So let's say 27th till the 31st, right? I can do that here, or I can do that in these settings, but I have lots of different ways I can do it. So this is everything happening in this week, right? And let's pick a room. This is the room that's going to be under maintenance. Okay. So I now have a list of 9 reservations happening in this week in this room. The easiest way for me to do it is I can select all of the reservations at once. And when I right click, I have some options. I can replace object. I can do a number of things, but the easiest way for me to do it, replace object, replace the room object, replace this one. Now I can also filter to pick one that would work, right, or is valid. And I can go and do that. I could also simply allow it to replace them based on another appropriate room. The way I can do that is instead of using replace object, I can go to automatic object selection, replace the room, but instead of just using the room here, don't include this one,
I don't know
include the other rooms.
like I don't have specific.
Oh, sorry, Mustafa, I think we've got a bit of poor connection there.
Compute just the room where you want to shift the classes. But if I want just send all classes now from this room that cannot now use, just distribute the classes in that time to other room, available room.
Mhm.
I don't
Yep.
need to specify.
No worries. I'm sorry, mate. Our internet cut out a little bit. I'll just make sure I heard you correctly after all that catches up. This room, so BH104 here, that one needs maintenance, but you don't know where you want to put it. You just want to spread it out into applicable rooms. Cool.
Correct.
Easy.
Yeah.
Here's the process.
Without
Here's the
any-
process.
With the same timing.
Same timing. Yep, no worries. So the only thing we change is the room, yeah? Right click.
Correct.
Remove all the rooms. Okay, get rid of all the rooms, de-room them. Yep, done. No more rooms. Now we tell the system for those particular reservations, right? Actually, what we probably should do, bear with me a moment. The best thing to do is not what I just did. The best thing to do is put them in a draft so that we know. So here's what I'll do. Okay, here's some rooms, right? First, we put them in a draft so we know which ones we're doing. Now we remove the rooms so they don't go anywhere. Okay, we still see all our rooms. The next step is again to accept them all. Automatic object selection. Now pick me a room. I don't care which room, just pick me a room from the valid objects that you can use and go. And it will give us a room. And we've now got rooms on them. The times don't change, the dates don't change, the students don't change, nothing changes except the rooms. And of course we can filter the rooms that are available here so that it selects rooms with certain criteria. So if I go back to my room, I have these filters. I can say only pick rooms of a certain type, or rooms that are not the room that I've just talked about here, for example.
Notify the end user also?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So what I would say is, generally speaking, it comes up in their calendar anyway. But of course, anytime I have a reservation like this, I'll just get out of my draft. So I've got my rooms here. Got a couple of things I can do. Give me a sec. All right. I don't have my option here because of my user, I'm sorry. But if you have the permission, which here we go, I can send that via email and notify the end user.
Your end
That
user
has been changed.
lecturer or the student or both?
It can be anyone that's on the reservation. So in this case, this email has been pulled automatically because that's my instructor's email. If I have students on there with email addresses, it will populate there too.
Okay.
Even a app space not integrated, the code automatically changes within the same day. Not published and table. How is that? Oh, amazing. Live, no, real time.
Yeah. Just noting that when we do make that change, it does automatically update into the timetable here instantly. So they don't necessarily need a notification if they have used our feature here to subscribe in their personal calendar. So they might get this in their Google Calendar or their Apple Calendar or their Outlook Calendar, whatever they prefer, or they can view it here. If they get it in their personal calendar, they usually have notifications when the date or time approaches based on their preferred configuration, and they can also get those notifications to support them as well.
Can we integrate with our internal push notification system?
If it can capture the information from API and we have some data in there to indicate where a change is made, sounds good. I would need to know a little bit more about your system, but I imagine the answer is a yes. And I'm excited to know how you do your internal push notifications because lots of people have problems with that.
We have our own system push notification. We build system that you can push notification in bulk, and it's through script, schedule script, or manually. Like you can go into the system and select whatever you want, student, email, take modules. I mean, we get Elasticsearch we're using for that, so we populate based on that. So one, I can select email or push notification also, or either one or both. So it will push for all of the students through our system.
Beautiful. Does that, I'm sorry, it cut out again a little. Does that deliver via email or via another method or both?
Both push notification, push mobile notification, and email also.
Oh, through your app?
Yes.
Oh, that's cool. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, team, the last bit that I just thinking of time, I do understand we are a little over. I can very quickly show you, as we have talked about, we collected some data. Again, whether it's class, whether it's examinations, to go right back to the start, the same is true of either. In order to schedule, we can filter what we received from the data collection as we like, and we see all of the different filters I have here. Whatever's in my data can become a filter. Yeah, I can filter it into batches if I like. Otherwise, scheduling is as simple as selecting them all, hitting my blue schedule button, giving the job a name, selecting a constraint profile, which is, as we saw before, for each job or for a batch of jobs. We can say which constraints should be hard, which constraints should be soft from that list. And then we hit schedule. Now, my input data, I have intentionally done some things to it. So we should see some things fail. And we should see some things be successful because my data is intentionally very messy. And I'll show you how we can handle if we have something that can't be met, what we can do next. So as I mentioned, when we talked about things like padding and that sort of stuff, we might see that it couldn't be met. So here, for example, I can't meet this one because I have specifically said I want 60 people in this class, this lecture, but it needs to be in a classroom. In my system, I don't have a classroom with 60 seats. I have only classrooms with up to 50 seats. So if I head down here, I only have classrooms with up to 50 seats. Alternatively, I could use overbooking capacities here if I have a classroom. So right now I don't have a filter. Bear with me a moment. Yeah, I need to make a bit of a change there. But in my interface here, if I'm just looking at the classrooms that are related to this particular one, I'll be able to see which ones are there and which ones aren't. So for this particular one, if I want to be able to schedule the other classes that did fail, easy enough for me to filter them out. I can modify this data directly if I'm allowed to. So someone like yourselves will be able to modify this data if you need to. Maybe modifying the filters, for example. So instead of getting this in a classroom, it's a lecture. I'm going to put it in a lecture theater, for example. Or, as we see in our constraint profiles, you might have a different set of rules. And this set of rules allows overbooking. What that means is, in this set of rules, where I have an activity size, for example, don't make that a hard constraint. Make it a soft constraint under the condition that if you can't find a room, use the overbooking capacity instead. That's what I'm telling the system here. And so what it's going to do is for these ones that failed, run another job. Use the rule set for overbooking capacity. And we'll see that they disappear. And they'll eventually become schedulable because I've selected to use the overbooking capacity instead of the normal capacity, and it's found an appropriate room. All is good. Now, that was a very messy data set, so that I can show you, if I look at this insights panel, every job that we run for auto scheduling, whether it's big or small, gets insights like this, where you can analyze the output. And in this particular job, you can see I had hard constraints that couldn't be met. Again, intentionally done. And it tells me how much my failure rate was, basically, and why there were failures, in this case, because they've asked for something they can't have, based on the combination of things. So for example, you can't have a room that big as a classroom. And for others, I'd allowed them in my data to give me a preferred day of the week, and I use it as a soft constraint. It's not very high on priority in my engine, but I let them pick a day and a time, and it'll try and get there if it can. For those that gave me a date and time, 72.5% couldn't be met because this data is incredibly highly constrained, right? And I can see that. I have visibility on that now, and I'm able to visualize that in my output. So I have a lot of different ways that I can visualize this and assess both the quality of my input and the quality of my output. Understanding that's a pretty quick demonstration of the auto scheduling, but I think the key is that you can see from our earlier piece, the input and the quality of the input is the most important thing. And we've walked through quite comprehensively what that looks like. Did anyone have any last questions before we start to wrap up, just given time?
Okay, the $1 million question. How we can have Jordan all the time in our team, or because everything look like got hints and tweaks and like things that you need to learn. The learning curve will take very long time, as I can see the complexity very high.
It doesn't have to be high, although I do appreciate the compliment. The complexity doesn't have to be high. This gives you an idea of what's possible. In your system, you may reduce the complexity significantly because you know exactly what you need to do. You have very clear rules on it, and we implement with you, alongside you, and train you for a system that is built for you and does what you need it to do. It doesn't have to do all these other things necessarily if you don't need it to do them.
Maybe I'll jump in. I'll jump in here a bit just to give Mustafa you a better idea of how we actually do the implementation for our clients. So whatever you're seeing, Jordan, here, you don't have to set this up. We actually do spend a couple of weeks with your team once we do the implementation to actually understand your requirements. After the understanding of requirements and functionality is done, that's when our implementation managers start to set up the system according to exactly what the university requires. After that is done, then we have like the UAT before it's commissioned live. Even after that, there's hypercare that is done with the implementation manager. So you're able to actually schedule together with support on our side. And then, of course, on top of this, we have training for system administrators also as well, where we will then actually train you how we set up the system, how you deploy the system totally on your own. After that, you can also engage us to also provide that kind of support, maybe in smaller functions. You know, after everything is done, you might say, look, I still need a bit of support here and there. I think then we can always discuss. So normally that's the process of the implementation. We never leave our clients just to do it on their own. We actually do a lot of hand-holding. It's a partnership, kind of program. Robert, Yon, anything else you want to add on this?
No. We want you to be successful, and we want you to be a happy client. So that's really important to us. And what we see often as well is that it's a journey. So maybe in the first year, you might not do everything super complicated. but you might learn maybe from other clients and from ourselves. Okay, this is possible, this is possible, and this is possible. That you basically year by year you are growing your skills. The situation, the educational situation might change as well. So for that reason, you might also say, okay, well, new situation, so maybe we need a new workflow. And yes, we can help you with that. And yeah, maybe you need more functionality to speed up better or to improve your processes. Yes, we can help you with that. So it's not that we, well, that you have everything in place, let's say, straight after the implementation and then basically we're gone. No, we are there basically for your whole journey.
Yeah, maybe
Absolutely.
Jordan, can you just give me the screen share? I'll just very quickly show one slide, maybe
Very
just
happily,
for
yep.
yeah, Mustafa's benefit, since we are talking a bit about this. So I think you can understand that TimeEdit is a enterprise system, and this is just a sample. This is not, of course, your timeline wise, but it does give you an idea of the number of activities that go on in an implementation. Is what we talked to you about. This is something that our implementation manager does together with your team. So you're not left to actually configure the system because it is an enterprise system. So from the suite configuration, the onboarding, the data migration, the scheduling, the integration support. We talked a bit about that today also as well. And then, of course, steering committee meetings to make sure that the whole project goes along site properly. This project sometimes can take as long as 6 to 8 months, for completion, depending on the complexity of the
We have
type
to
of
approve for Jordan
operations.
for 6 months.
Yeah, I mean that's part of the whole implementation costs as well. We get a person like Jordan. We have multiple clones of Jordan actually. He's not the only super expert, although he is a unique skill set by himself. But just to give you an idea of what goes on in implementation. Yeah.
I'm good.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would be happy to visit KL, maybe not for 6 months. We'll see. I have a little family. They will probably not be happy with me. But I, again, appreciate the compliment.
Okay, thank you very much for this session. And hope
It's
Miss
been an absolute
Salvia,
pleasure.
with the system, we will have your feedback with the management. So we'll forward. Okay. Okay.
Wonderful.
So as a follow-up, Mustafa, what would you like to recommend? Would you like to see a bit more demos? Because I think, again, this is a complex system. Covering it in, as you can see, 2.5 hours might not be sufficient. We will send you the video of today's demo recording so you can actually review that. And after reviewing, you might actually have more questions. Would you like to maybe consider seeing more, or is there anything else that you need from us?
Yeah, because this session actually arranged based on our feedback last time. We said we cannot bring everything in one. So we have to see where we can fit in first. We go by select modules. So we see this will fill up the gap. Then slowly we see if it's beneficial more to add more module, or we stick with the module that we select. We see it's suitable for our workflow. Then we have to start small, then as we agree with, then we go slowly up bigger. Then now we're trying to identify the missing point in our process, where, like, for example, the exam scheduling and the seat management, one of the things that we don't have full automated system. So
Yep.
that's why I highlighted the exam scheduling and the seat management system. Also, but for this session, I believe for exam already settled. My understanding, I can see everything. You answer all our questions, but for other modules, maybe our team can advise which other module you can, or from you guys, which module you feel can suit our process flow, we can start with.
Jordan, what do you think based on your interaction today and the last session? Would you recommend another session for them, maybe a few weeks down the road, on any other things? What do you think, Jordan?
Probably not. I don't think there's more that we really need to cover in visual terms. I think what we need to do now is talk the other side of things, the commercials, and understanding what the pathway is here. So if you'll be moving to a formal procurement, or whether there's a separate exercise that doesn't require tender. In either case, some functional requirements. If you've got those documented, obviously we've talked about what you need, so we've got a good idea of it, but having that written and to give you a response there as well, also super helpful. So look, I think that's a good way forward. I don't know that additional demonstrations will help unless you have additional questions that I can speak to. And I'd be more than happy to do it if that's what you'd like. But yeah, I think now it's between us and you as to here's what we can offer. How would you like to prioritize the work based on your timelines and your budget? And then here is what we can, here is the more information we can give you to help you make your decisions.
It might be a good idea maybe to start off with a like for like. So what you
Right.
have right now, but improve that a little bit. So let's say, because you do the auto scheduling already, I think you need the data collection, so preferences, you need core, autopilot, and viewer, and maybe reserve. And maybe start with that. When that is live, then maybe have a look at, okay, how can we improve the whole exam process? Yeah, because that's not you have a more manual system, I understood, for that. So that might be then maybe a second phase. Or if you say, okay, no, both are as urgent, well, we can do it both at the same time, but probably it's best to start with the like for like. So you build up the experience there, you know a lot more what is possible, and then basically start growing the system when it suits you best.
Okay, maybe I can throw a few questions. Are we going, maybe this for all of us, maybe this question. Is it the best time to just directly jump replace Unitime, or we should start from other modules, then later we see if we can replace Unitime or no? Is this question can jump in? Or we can just start by exam scheduling and the seat management system, then we see how we can integrate with other system like Unitime. I mean, this is the question will pop up. Then
Sure.
back the commercial decision also. It's like what we need actually in the end. What will be give big impact? Because I mentioned like last meeting again, we have now Unitime, but when we move to TimeEdit, is gonna do big impact or no? Like replacing system with system. We're still doing the same job, but what's the big impact happening? So this is where the decision making will be impact.
Sure.
So we have to identify and explain for the management, this is the big impact happening. That's why we're trying to solve it by jumping to this to the new platform. So if this can be clarified for between both of us and presented for the management, this is how we can make confidence from our decision. Because right now I see still in the gray area, like, yeah, we want, but we don't want in the same time. So so if we are not confident enough, we cannot make the decision for management to move ahead and
Correct.
frame what we want in terms of commercial decision.
Correct. So then would it be helpful to you if we were to help you with formulation of a business case? Great. That might be the next step, because for us, we provide you with commercials, obviously, is probably the real next step. Some indicative idea of value to help your decision making, and we provide you with the business case to tell you what each section of the platform can do as far as benefit, and then we go from there. That's my eyes.
Jordan, would it help if they give us maybe more detailed information of their workflow now and what
Definitely.
they're doing? Then we
Anything
can
that you've got.
make a better comparison from our perspective. So if you have like a workflow, kind of a sheet where you actually say, look, this is what we do every semester. How many man hours do we take, for this particular thing? We can actually then review that. And then from our system perspective, then advise you what kind of time savings you could have,
Yep, exactly. Yep, we can make that relevant to you specifically.
Phases, if you jump in first, this is the biggest impact. So this is where we jump in. Then after that, phase 2, if you do integration with this module, you will enhance your process by this way. So,
Yep.
but it would not be like big impact like the first step. So, but it's important to move further. So we can come out with maybe 5 steps or 5 phases. So, but the first phase is the biggest impact. Then the other one more on automation, streamline the process, enhance the data quality. I mean, all of this topic we just now highlighted. So I believe this will
Correct.
be good roadmap for us and for the management to see we are clear what we are doing. We have short-term and long-term plan. We can stop where we can just get the best from wherever we are.
Exactly. We'll give you okay, so part of that business case might be some piece of the journey, right? Mapping the journey for you and understanding what that looks like. So that's something we can probably add to that. And between Trevor, Sanazar, Robertjan, and myself, we can get that information across to you.
Okay, that's cool. So what you need to know what I mean, what other question that you need to let us know. So we
Yes.
can have a short meeting or other meeting that just to let you know what you need. Then you can highlight, okay, guys, based on your process flow, this is the highest impact that we can offer you, and this
Yes.
module that give you the highest impact. And but I understand there is like, for example, if I need to use the exam scheduling now, what a core module I have to subscribe
Yeah.
with it. So you have to highlight also this is a must. Either you choose exam alone or no. This is like the core module. It has to be the autopilot. It has to be in. So something like.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll include that as part of the business case collateral. While we get that to you, any examples of data that you have, right? So if it's the structure of your Excel file for data collection, or if it's the output that you have to deal with for your exam, or it's
Yeah, you need to be more specific because we need to let which team need to prepare the data. Like, actually, we want the data because we have multiple teams. So we need to request each team the data that they need to prepare, and maybe you give us few questions. So we will identify the team and we will ask them, this is what we need for the next meeting. So we will prepare the data. Maybe we send also for you to have review on it. Then during the meeting, we can agree on what you have received. Then after that, you can clarify and summarize what you need to do.
Okay, that sounds like a pretty good idea.
Yeah. We have a discovery document. So Mustafa will send that to your team. It's quite a detailed one, but that will allow us to actually be able to analyze your system, your workflow. And then after that, as what you have mentioned, then we can make a professional recommendation on how best to move forward. So, okay, noted. That's something that we'll follow up on.
I'll share with you NDA before I send you. We start sharing with you because we already share. But anyway, we still need, once we start sending files from our end, we have to sign NDA.
Very good. No problem. Yeah, it's not
Wonderful.
Not a problem.
Thank you, everyone, for your attention.
Thank you,
This has
guys.
been an absolutely wonderful demonstration. Lots of great questions. I've had a lot of fun. Thank you for everything.
Thanks, Jordan. Appreciate your time. Thank you,
No
Mustafa.
worries.
Thank you, Sabia. Thank you.
All right. We'll speak soon.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye, Sabia.